Welcome back to Witch on the Holy Nights. We're coming back after a crazy climax of a chapter, building back up to something new, hopefully. Starting on what chapter? What name? Like a dog. All right, let's see what that's supposed to mean. Are girls going back to the mansion together? Tense situations? Are we going back to chill mode? I don't know. Chapter 6. Dang, we come so far. He was still in a deep sleep. Don't start with innocence. Oh man. It all seemed to blaze in a mind fiery red. Is this innocence? It's one of those. Unbearable, idle thoughts. Insistent, obstinate. Oh, damn, I was so close. Obstinacy? Obstinacy? I feel like this was wrong. Melancholy sights and gloomy, bittersweet talk. Fickle wickedness born of human interaction, namely, the voice of a forsaken coexistence. This, however, was the scenery of a world far removed from that. If there were those praying this was paradise, then there were likely also those lamenting it as the underworld. In a decade, or perhaps longer, this would all change. But for now, the autumn leaves remained yet untrampled by human souls. It was the scenery he knew well. Life in the mountains was humble and modest. There were no conspicuous buildings among the wilderness he called home. They gathered and stockpiled only what they needed to survive without pillaging the land. Serpentine trails could be seen woven through the fields, and the stone steps leading to the summit were obscured by the forest, only visible once upon them. The mountain inhabitants probably intended it that way. There was no sign of mankind's exploitation among the mountain's landscape. He suddenly remembered that this was the season he liked the most. Or rather, it suited him the most. There was so much to be done to prepare for winter, but whenever he had the free moment, he would make his way towards the mountaintop. Gazing idly at the setting sun while breathing deep the crisp autumn air was probably the second favorite of his daily joys. It relaxed him, the cold but comforting wind at dusk. The only way the sunset dyed the peaks a vibrant crimson. Not 2 months had passed since coming down from the mountains, and already it pained him that the memories had begun to fade. Someone once told him that memories fade every day, so the best you do. What is happening? All right, this is right after my Elden Ring stream for 7 hours. Can I? I have to make an excuse every time I can't read because it's never my fault. It's never the fact that I'm just a bad reader. Never. So the best you, what? So the best you, one do. Okay, so it wasn't me. So the best you one do is make as many new ones as possible. So the best one can do is make as many new ones as possible. Recollections grew hazy. A new place to live meant the beginning of a new life. He wasn't sure if he was reluctant to let go of the scenery he'd cherished for so long, or if he'd merely been spoiled by it. Despite his new home in a city surrounded by tall buildings, he felt guilty for wanting those memories alone to remain clear in his mind. Either way, he had to make the best of a fresh start. What kind of man thinks more about where he came from than where he's going, he contemplated.
そうか。これ、夢だ。
He tried to stop himself from indulging in uncharacteristic sentimentality. It wouldn't be a dream if it was easy to understand. Ooh. The moment he realized he was dreaming, angular shadows began to rise from the autumn colors. There were concrete buildings, previously unknown and yet familiar to him at the same time. This was how his current life was washing away his memories. Struggling as he might, there was no stopping the degradation right, of human memory or impressions. It was merely a fact of life. By nature, humans lived in the present over the past. Eventually, even his most cherished memories would be swallowed up by the buildings. It was neither cruel nor heartless. If they were sure to disappear, then for now, he would content himself with dreaming about the memories he could clearly recall. Whether in the mountains or the city, the days flew by. Yesterday's scenery was not the same as today's. Kaiju Alko and such. She had given him no time to grieve. Distant nostalgia was beautiful, but that made it fleeting.
土産入道じゃないんだぞ、青崎。
A faint dizziness made him close his eyes. Without sight, the mountainous landscape vanished. But in its place, a familiar voice could be heard. It was a booming voice that seemed to shake not only the mountainside he stood upon, but the entire mountain as well. And of course, Alko Awazaki reappeared, towering in the distance. He must have been tired, he thought, diagnosing himself while trying to make out what she was saying. Fearing the vertigo would return if he reopened his eyes, he decided to keep them closed. It sounded like she was arguing with someone, though the tone was all he could make out. It wasn't violent, but certainly aggressive. Maybe she was picking fight with another mountain across the way. He wouldn't put it past her. After all, she was a troublemaker who blew up the moon. He couldn't quite grasp the conversation. Though as someone vaguely, he had the sense that his human rights were being largely ignored. It was deeply unsettling, even for a dream. After several minutes, it seemed that the high-impact argument ended in Alko's victory. Then suddenly, the boisterous voice faded. Praying everything would be back to normal, he opened his eyes. He took a deep, slow breath. The scenery was a far cry from the nostalgic dreamscape he had just left, albeit not unpleasant either. Without a doubt, it was the amusement park. To him, his was his freshest memory. He recalled the house of mirrors that Alko destroyed. The park was flawless, a flawless replica of reality, but he was the only one there. Without having to worry about anyone chasing him, he sat down on the wreckage of Kitsy rides and looked up at the moon that should have been shot down. The winter moon shone. Shone. I don't know why I can't say that right. Shined white like a jewel. It was layered over the figure of the girl who tried to kill him. If a mage was a witch, then she definitely fit the bill. I don't mind being killed. Such an absurd thing to say, but it spilled out of him so naturally.
でも
That had nothing to do with witches or magecraft. There was an echo in the gaps of his heart. If she had not spoken those words, then he would not have responded as she did. He did. In that moment, what had Alko Awazaki said to him? As he tried to remember, his deep slumber drew to an end, and with it, his chance to find the answers he so wished he could find. Then, Sojiro woke up in an unfamiliar room, gasping. Not because the plush mattress he was on was softer than his apartment cheap futon, or because everything from the carpet to the wallpaper looked expensive. Yes, Alice. Alice is my girl. Oh my god. Bewildered, he tried to catch his breath. She was the cause of his surprise. The moment Sojiro's eyes snapped open, there she was, the girl dressed in black, sitting at his bedside. The silence was deafening. Still supine on the bed, Sojiro gazed at her. His impulse was to sit up, but he refrained, thinking it might be rude to be staring. Wait, what? I'm sorry. Thinking it might be rude to be it staring at the person sitting next to him. It's not me, right? I mean, you know, I've known English for a long time. Thinking it might be rude to be staring at the person sitting next to him. I don't think it's supposed to be there. She was just sitting there on a chair, dressed in black, modest clothes. Still, she projected an air that was anything but plain. Her monochrome outfit evoked indescribable elegance, like a costume handmade just for her from the finest fabrics. It was enough to inspire poetic sentiments even in Sojiro. The girl continued to sit, completely motionless. Without realizing it, Sojiro had stopped breathing. Genuine astonishment had him captivated. Such beauty. It was the first time he had ever thought to use such a simple, plain expression to describe another human being. She was a daffodil in perfect bloom, or the ideal female form seen only in dreams. The quality was something to be cherished and admired in her. It was different from Akazaki's blindingly radiant vitality. After all, the flame that burns twice as bright burns half as long. There was no way this girl would be allowed such a happy ending. Her life was a solitary fable of someone who left the world in exactly the same way they entered it. With her humanity stolen at birth, hers was an existence not of this world. The more beautiful something was, the more tragic its fate. Growing up in the mountains, this was not something Sojiro was taught, but something he learned from experience. Wow.
眠ってるみたいだ。
Sojiro turned his head, as though he was being lured in. He knew it was rude to stare, but he couldn't fight his instincts. Then...
Huh?
Look at her. Even Sojiro knows. That's why Sojiro's my boy. He knows. This time, his heart actually skipped a beat. She was not asleep at all. Expressionless, she was merely watching over him while he recovered. Oh my god, my girl Alice. Put her in Melty Blood just so I cannot play her and just see her, you know? Because I'm not playing a public. Maybe I would. Maybe I would learn it. Just for her. Sojiro froze, unable to turn his head away or think of something clever to say. It was like staring into her eyes turned him to stone. Perhaps because of her delicate features, she looked somewhat younger than him. On the other hand, her tranquil expression made him feel like she was older. Jet black hair, just to her shoulders. Her large eyes were set like onyx stones, matching her hair. Devoid of emotion, her gaze stayed fixed on Sojiro. Even after their eyes met, she did not turn away. Okay, Sojiro, we get it. He wanted to speak, but could not find the words. It was not unlike a frog being stared down by a snake. Nevertheless, he just could not bring himself to say something. Additionally, no matter how carefree Sojiro might have been, he was painfully aware that this girl was as powerful as Alka. Less talkative to be sure, but still powerful. Objectively, the scene was not unlike that of someone nursing a bedridden stranger. Bedridden. He had no idea what she might have been thinking about, but it seemed to him this harsh silence might last forever. All he could say for sure was that the quiet did not appear to bother her in the slightest. It was like some bizarre form of punishment.
これが青崎の仕込みなら手が込みすぎる。
He thought, keeping his eyes on the girl. He felt like the moment he turned his head or blinked, she might stab him in the chest with a hidden blade. Not because his imagination was running away with him. In the stifling silence, it was only natural that Sojiro would think back on what happened in the amusement park, and it made him uneasy. But stronger than any anxiety was his fascination with the girl. Her slender frame and milky white skin, the chill of her guarded stare, the warmth of her lingering femininity. It was the mixture of both two lighter qualities that was almost magical. He stared at her for so long, he began to get the feeling, wow, that he had met her. Wait, they had met somewhere before? Sometime before the conflict at Kitsyland, wow. He could not quite put his finger on it, but he was sure he had seen her previously. Is he talking about at school?
その今更だけど
His voice shattered the frozen silence in the room. He almost felt sorry for making noise as he spoke out to her. But they could not very well just sit and stare at each other forever. Though he might have been the only one thinking they were staring, and perhaps she thought they were glaring at each other.
ここはどこで君は誰だかわかるかな
She narrowed her eyes slightly, though apparently not out of offense. There was no response. Just as he was thinking it would have been better to keep quiet, she quietly raised her hand.
これあなたのでしょ
Her voice was cold, but melodic. A white piece of cloth was wrapped in her fingers. There was no need to tell him what it was. He was conscious enough to recognize his own possessions. Sojiro sat speechless as she tossed it to him. Picking it up, he wrapped it around his neck.
青子はそれを知っているの
Huh? He looked away in response to her blunt question. Distracted by something unrelated, she called Aoko Azaki by her given name, which led him to believe that the Mount Aoko had argued with in his dream last night was actually the girl beside him.
さあどうだろ
As sincerely as he could, he answered the question without presumption. There are things that should be known and things that need not be. There are also things that should be told and other things that must not be. Shoujo was not exactly sure what that she was referring to. However,
うでもその方がいいとは思うよ
he smiled slightly at her question. Perhaps impressed by his response, the overwhelming pressure in the room dissipated noticeably. Or maybe she had been more nervous than he was the entire time, projecting the image that his room was her domain a tad too strongly. The tension faded. Sojiro tried to sit up and prop his arms beneath him. Now that they were talking, it seemed awkward to stay lying down. However, his body felt strange as he tried to move, and it surprised him how difficult it was to sit up. It took everything he had just to raise his upper body to a sitting position.
あれ洋服のままだ
What did he expect? As he threw the covers back, he tilted his head quizzically.
申し訳ないこんないい布団なのにこれじゃ不釣り合いだというよりもったいない
She stared at him, not expecting him to complain about not wearing pajamas while sleeping. Somehow, it appeared that he had done something to surprise her.
なんでだ何もしてないぞ俺
Pouting a bit at the unwarranted curiosity, he turned to face her. Although he was still mostly lying down, it was at least a more dignified position.
それでさっきの続きだけど
Indeed, he needed to find out where he was and who she was before anything else. Actually, the more he thought about what happened at the amusement park, the more he got a sinking feeling in his stomach. I love her faces. Perhaps finally getting through to her, she calmly moved her arm from behind her back when... Once again, they silently locked eyes. Thump, thump, thump. There was a startling sound of rapidly approaching footsteps. They both had a pretty good idea of who it was.
アリス約束
Just as expected, Aoko Aozaki burst through the door with a thunderous roar. She entered wearing her school uniform, her long hair flowing behind her, Her breathing was heavy and her forehead was wrinkled by a scowl, granting her a demonic appearance.
アリス
Alice. This girl named Alice scowled slightly in response. She may have even let out a sigh of disappointment.
早かったわね青子
Her calm voice was polar opposite of Alka's. Needless to say, her voice dripped with a brazen coldness.
そりゃあんたの性格は知り抜いてるからねこういう時の短絡思考はこの2年で経験済みよお行儀がいいようで面倒になったらあっさり投げ捨てるのがあんたでしょいやね人聞きの悪い
Effortlessly, she brushed aside Alko's jab. In doing so, Sojiru had the distant impression that she no longer even realized he was in the room. For some reason, I can't get uncomfortable. I don't know what's going on with my mic setup today. I don't know what's going on with the chair. For some reason, I just can't. I can't get comfortable. What's happening? Oh, Carrie, come on.
は
Be
そ
comfortable.
れで今日まで何度煮え湯を飲まされたことか青子に譲ると言ったけどよく考えると面倒だから私の方で処理しておいたわなんて言い訳もう聞き飽きたっつーの短期なのはそっちの自由だけどそれなら後の始末は相方に任せるのが最低限の筋ってもんじゃないのそうねそうでなければ共闘している意味がないわまあ今後の方針を勝手に決めた人のセリフじゃないとは思うけどそれもきっちり型をつけたでしょいい勝ったのは私たちよ逃げ切れば見逃してあげるって言ったのは誰言動には責任を持ちなさいアリスそれとも何もしかして一番気に食わないのはそのあたりの理由なわけ
Alice frowned slightly and fell silent. Her housemate seemed to have struck a nerve that Alice herself did not know was there.
とにかくこいつの扱いはちゃんと目が覚めて本人の意思でどうするか決めるまで保留ってことで合意したでしょ人の留守中に出し抜くのはやめてよねそれ青子学校はどうしたのまだ正午になったばかりなのにアリスのとこが今日で終わりって思い出して家庭の事情ってことで早退したのよ期末試験前だってのにほんと何やってんのか
Akko grumbled more to herself than anyone else in the room. I'm sorry, I love Alice's face. Then she locked eyes with Alice. Or miraculously, they glared daggers at each other. The room had become tense once again, and it felt like a fight could break out at any moment, with no way to escape. Soldier had no choice but to sit and watch. But then, the electric silence that seemed like it would last forever suddenly broke about a minute later. Apparently, this sort of clash was an everyday occurrence.
私は今に行っているから彼に事情を説明してあげて
Alice stood up from the chair and made it for the door. Watching her go, Sojiro cocked his head. In her hand was what could only be described as...
果物ナイフ
He had no other words to describe the tool she was clutching.
アリスあえて聞くけどその手に持ってるの何
Akko asked Alice as she walked past.
探検ね
Alice answered expressionlessly before briskly walking out the room. She's a goat. Sojiro thought it best not to think too deeply about the scene he had just witnessed. At any rate, the girl in black had withdrawn, and along with her, the feeling of tension, leaving a bedridden Sojiro alone with Alko still dressed for school. From Sojiro's perspective, this was a perfect chance to get answers to his ever-growing list of questions.
わけのわからないことだらけだ青崎
でしょうね
順序立てて説明してあげるからちょっと黙ってて。顔の麻痺も取れてるし呼吸も再開っと。これならもう安心かな。
She nodded, satisfied as she took a seat.
どう調子は。
なんかだるい。
He answered meekly, dropping his shoulders. He opened and closed his left hand a few times, but moving his fingers felt slow and awkward. It was clear he was still in a bad shape. Meanwhile, Alko was blinking her eyes in wonder. Or was it admiration? Between Alice and Alko, Sojiro did not know which of the girls was the harder to read.
体が重いのは当
I feel
然
like
よ。
it's definitely Alko, because Alko's like kind of two-faced. Because she has to be.
丸2日経ってるし、寝てるだけでも体は弱ってるだろうし。でも、もう話せるくらい回復してるとは思わなかった。あんたって見かけより頑丈にできてるのね。
ん ?2 日って？
あれからそれだけ経ってるの。学校には欠席届出しといたから、その点は安心して。ガンドの呪いもダンプティの呪いも、私とアリストで解除しといたから。
Sojiro nodded at the word curse, as if recalling it suddenly. It was all coming back to him now.
どうかした？そんな遠い目しちゃって。
ああ、忘れてた。それで2日も寝込んでたのか。怖いもんだな、呪われるってことは。
ほんと緊張感ないわね、あんた。ローのように眠ってたのが嘘みたいよ。下手すると一生あのまま石膏もどきだったかもしれないのに。
ちょっと待った。今すごいこと言わなかったか？
言ったけど、聞かぬが花よ。経緯はどうあれ、後でアリスにお礼を言っときなさい。私じゃ解除できなかったんだから。
ひどい花もあったもんだ。あ、けどアリスっていうのはさっきの子か？遊園地で俺たちを殺そうとした？
Akko replied that it
彼女
was.
ずっとそこに座ってたけど、ここは彼女の部屋なのか？
Sojiro scanned the room again. I'm like 1,000% sure she was trying to make sure that when you waked up, you didn't try to kill her. He was not accustomed to sleeping on anything other than a futon, and the room looked especially foreign to him.
うん、ここはただの客室。長いこと使ってなかったから埃だらけでしょ。それよりアリスと何か話したの？あなた。
いや、あれを会話というのはちょっと。
He brought his hand to his mouth and recalled the few words they exchanged. As Sojiro said, calling it a conversation would be a gross overstatement. And yet, thinking back on it, it seemed like they had talked for hours, which brought an uncomfortable smile to his face.
とはいえ、緊張は解けたと思うよ。青崎がやってくるのがもう少し遅かったらよかったのに。
Okay, Sojiro, I see you. I ain't mad at it. Akko narrowed her eyes at his innocent slip of the tongue. She knew Sojiro did not mean to treat her like a nuisance, but nevertheless, she found it hard to take the full brunt of the words said to her face. Even worse, she said she was getting used to his manner of speaking.
でも、だからなのかもね。相変わらず首の皮一枚の人生を送ってるわ、あなたって。
He tilted his head, clearly confused.
だから、あんたはよっぽどアリス好みの対応をしたのよ。まだ生きてるってそういうこと。
ん？
No matter how hard he tried, he could not grasp what she was getting at. He decided to change the subject to something else.
ところで、ここはどこなんだ？あの子に聞いても教えてくれなかったけど、青崎なら教えてくれるだろう。
ここは三崎町の幽霊屋敷よ。正確には久遠寺邸と言えばいいかしらね。 さっきの子クオンジュアリスの持ち家で私が住んでるところでもある。あの後あなたをここまで持ってきたんだけど覚えてないでしょ？
Something about the way she said that made him feel
クオンジ
uncomfortable.
っていう名前は聞き覚えがあるような。そうだ、よく商店街でおじさんたちが話してた。なんでも偉いお金持ちだとかなんとか。
それアリスの前ではご法度よ。穏便にここで暮らしたいならね。
Confused yet again, Sojiro tilted his head, for it seemed like the 100th time that day. And once again, he had heard something to make him feel uneasy.
青崎、君今なんて言った？
しずきくん、私ね、あからさまな嘘を言う人と同じことを何度も言わせる人と察しの悪い人には容赦しないから。
Fair enough.
そのあたり覚えておいてね。ここで平穏に暮らしたいなら。
With her best smile, Akko made her threatening proclamation. Needless to say, it caught Sojiro completely off
気の
guard.
せいならいいんだけど、君の言葉には俺がここに住むような響きが感じられる。
Yo, Tight Moon, whoever's the main lead artist, bro, W art when it comes to the faces. Like, it's a serious face, but it's still funny. It's nice. He shot her an honest stare of disapproval. It was the best resistance he could muster. But it was not in the slightest effective against Akko's overpowering, ruthless glare.
あなた、自分の立場を分かってる？
He considered his words carefully. He wanted to openly express his feelings on the matter, but instead he swallowed his words and shook his head. Despite his typical inability to read people's emotions, he at least seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. It appeared that he had finally realized that it was his carefree mood that typically got on Akko's nerves.
ああ、そうだった。あんたに回りくどいこと言っても無駄だったのよね。いいわ。考える時間ぐらいあげたかったけど、時間もないし、はっきりと言ってあげる。いい？しずきくん。この度、あなたは私たちの監視下に置かれることになりました。しばらくはここで一緒に暮らしてもらいます。もちろん、生殺与奪の権利はこちらにあるという条件で。
The blatant irony in her voice caused him to sputter. He wished that she would stop smiling in an attempt to make it seem any less
一
outrageous.
緒に住むって青崎とか？
It was not the faint expectation of living under the same roof with Alko that had him flustered. Rather, he was genuinely concerned about his own safety. Regardless of how good-natured he was, it seemed he had finally come to grips with the fact that he just couldn't escape death.
とんでもない。
Wait, I'm sorry.
Tommy Milo
What?
cannot-
That's not what that said. That he just escaped death. Game? Concerned about his own safety. Yes, 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 yes. No, I keep skipping. It
冬
doesn't
眠
matter.
前の熊と一緒に暖を取るようなもんだ。
Akko agreed as blunt as a comparison as it was.
たまには的確な比喩をするじゃない。あなたの言う通り、下手なことをしたり決まりを破ったりしたら、今度こそ息の根止めるからね。それと、ここに住んでるのは私とアリスの2人だけよ。あの子、私なんかより数倍常識ないから、気をつけないと死んじゃうぞ。
Alko was 100% serious. It was her sincerity that made it all the more believable.
いや。
Obviously, there was no way the victim, Sojiro, could accept these
待ってくれ。
terms.
俺にはちっとも青崎がわからない。監視するって言うけど、なんでそんな話になってるんだ？考えられる範囲、悪いこととかしてないし、そもそも俺を見張っても得なことなんて一個もないし、青崎はいろいろ間違ってる。いや、それとも魔術師っていうのはみんな青崎みたいなのか。
arrogant and selfish were the words that the harmless boy's gaze seemed to imply. Bro, the art is so amazing in this visual novel. Oh my god. Akko felt a headache coming on. Due to his innate, easygoing persona, Sojiro had not thought to question that Akko being a mage was out of the ordinary.
だからあんたがそういう風に誰はばかることなく私たちのことを言いふらさないかを見張ってんじゃないこの常識なし
Akko flew out of her chair. She had been doing her best to keep her cool, but it seemed her well of patience had finally run dry. Witnessing Akko snap, Sojiro clapped his hands together.
そうか。青崎が俺を殺そうとしたのは魔術師であることを隠さなくちゃいけないからだったっけ。
That is crazy because they never explained that to him. He was just first getting killed.
それならわかる。監視するのは青崎の秘密のことで、俺の命云々はおまけみたいなものか。
まあ本質的に
I'm
そう
sorry.
だけど身も蓋もないわねその言い方
I've said this before, but if I ever get to the point where I can have memberships on this channel, all of the emotes are coming straight from this visual novel. Come on, that is perfect.
けど、それはあまり意味がないんじゃないか。学校もあるし、バイトだってあるんだ。一日中この家から出ないわけにはいかないんだぞ。
What are you working for at that point? You have Alice. Just ask for Wait a minute. If they have so much money because it's Alice, why is takeout such an issue, bro? Why is food an issue? I guess it's not the food itself. It's the fact that it can't get delivered there. Oh my god. For some reason, my glasses just got super foggy. I don't know what happened. Edit? Oh, wait. No, that's my eyes. What the hell? Oh, hell no. Yo, no. That's the screen. It just... No. Oh my... Yo, y'all can see me tomorrow. What the hell? I'm like kind of seeing double low-key. I've been on this computer for way too long. I have the blue light glasses so my eyes don't get that messed up, but oh hell no. Why did that just happen so randomly? Oh my guys, the things I do for my passion and for fun. I can't I should stop, right? I should stop for today. The thing is, I'm recording this on Friday, so I have until Sunday to be done with this. So I'd have to... Yo, there's no way I can continue if I'm seeing double right now, bro. I'm sorry. There's just no way. It's all the same to you guys. You'll still get the video. Youth in the future, I'm sorry you have to do this all so last minute. Oh my gosh. I'll go out of the blue. That's so insane to me. All right. Good night, me editing. I guess you guys, it's gonna be like a second. I'm sorry. Go. All right. I'm back from the past day. I feel a lot better now. It's like 6 a.m. in the morning, so I woke up early so I could still have that dark, you know, nighttime feeling when I'm watching this. Hopefully, it doesn't lead into the morning. Whatever. In an instant, Sojiro's objectivity had her stumped, leaving her at a loss for words. He honestly had no idea what position he was in. To believe that he had any sort of freedom at this point was shocking, to say the least.
いや落ち着け私話が早くなってある意味助かるし
Akko somehow managed to compose herself. As a matter of fact, she never had any intention of imprisoning him. Stripping him of his freedom and incarcerating him would go against their agreement anyway. Besides, if she was going to go that far, it would be easier to just kill him. To Akko, letting him live meant showing a modicum? Never seen that word before. Of respect to Sojiro's way of life.
もしかしてこの部屋から出ちゃいけないのか俺。
A light bulb went on in his head as he blurted out what he was thinking. It appeared that he had finally gotten the grim message. Akko looked somewhat satisfied at his dismay.
大丈夫よ監禁生活なんて面倒なことだけはしないからあなたの自由はそれなりに考慮してありますそのあたりのさじ加減はアリスの手腕に任せてあるからあなたは心配しなくていいわ
A gloomy look fell over Sojiro's face as he found his concern growing by the second. Does Alice not have any spells or witchcraft that could stop you from saying specific words? Like how your boy in ReZero, I almost said Sojiro. Subaru can't say that specific word. I guess I don't want to spoil it, so he can't say that specific word. That was so cool how they turned it around. And you know what I'm talking about? Like when he said the word and then it was like, instead of, that, like if you watch it, Mm-mm.
いい。あなたの処遇はこの家に住むことを前提にした監視で、それも解決策が見つかるまでの期間限定。何でもいいから目撃者を殺すなんてことより、こっちの方がよっぽど穏便でしょ。だいたいこれは私とあなたとの約束なんだから、いちいち文句言わないでよね。ただでさえアリスとの冷戦が続いてて頭痛いんだから。
She sighed as she stared at Sojiro down as he lay on the bed.
けど勘違いはしないで。ここじゃあんたの地位は最下層のさらに下、番犬より下なんだから。あんたの生殺与奪はあの夜から私が握ってるんだから。あんたは私に所有されてるようなもんなの。さ、これで自分の立場分かった？
As Alice finished her declaration, Sojiro suddenly looked up at the ceiling, so she would not notice his reaction. He meant no offense to Alko, but he had to hide the fact that he fundamentally disagreed with her analogy. In Sojiro's opinion, it was disrespectful to both dogs and humans to call them lower than a dog. A more accurate analogy of their power dynamic would be that of a rabbit and a wild boar, hence why he chose not to voice his opinion. His face. You see his face in the corner of the screen? Unlike his apartment, the ceiling was decorated with ornate patterns. Putting aside how he would be treated here, in terms of lodging, it was a definite upgrade. Maybe it would not be all bad after all. Sojiro nodded slowly, as if to persuade himself. And
とりあえず命は助けてあげるから。
this
is what she had told him, not 2 days ago.
あまり納得したくないけど、自分の立場は分かったよ。うん、確かにそんな約束だった。いろいろと言いたいことはあるけど、それは認めるしかない。だけど、君たちと一緒に住めっていうのは本気なのか？青崎は細かいことは気にしないとしても、さっきの子は嫌がりそうだし。
At that point, he zipped his lips. Alko's eyes were tinged with bloodlust.
あら、しずきくんはご不満？
Her contrived smile, so obviously forced, struck despair into Sojiro's heart. Come to think of it, he vaguely recalled her warning to him to not make her repeat herself. Furthermore, as a practical matter, Sojiro Suzuki's life was now in the hands of Alko Awazaki. It would be unwise to anger her further, he told himself as if speaking to a third person.
いや、別に。だってそれ以外ないんだろ。
None, Alko said with a firm nod of her head. Sojiro slumped his shoulders in surrender.
青崎の言い分は分かった。ただ、一応聞いておきたいんだけど、俺の人権はどこに行ってしまったんだろう。
バカね。そんな形のないものなんて初めからあるわけないでしょ。つまんないこと言わないでよ。
I gotta take a minute for a moment of silence for Sojiro. A moment of silence. Thank you, I appreciate it. Sojiro reflected upon her answer, now feeling like his question was indeed stupid. He should have already known the answer before he asked.
ああ、だと思った。そんな気はしてたんだ。目が覚める前から。
ん？
His muttering provoked a dubious stare from Alko before she quickly retracted it. If she questioned every little thing he said, they would be there till sundown.
とにかく納得いったみたいね。じゃあ次、いよいよ本題。今に移動するわよ。説明しなくちゃいけないことが山ほどあるんだから。
Brass tacks? Bro, that's what people say? Hold on. Now I gotta search up what that means. Because I've heard people say brass tacks before, but I didn't know it was spelled like that or said like tax. Hold on, what is brass tack? Am I stupid for not knowing this? Am I? Oh, that's a brass tag. Hey yo, that's a brass tag. Why have I used those so much and I've never heard anyone call it that? I never heard anyone say, "Hey yo, use this brass tacks." I never heard no one say that. Make sure you grab a brass tacks. Hey, if you want to pin that up, use a brass tacks. Never. I've never heard anyone use it like that. I've always heard it used in this context. We need to get down to the brass tacks. I've always heard it in that context. I've never heard anyone talk about it for like folders or anything. Or envelopes per se. What in the world? That's funny. Dang, I never knew that was called a brass tack. That's crazy. I have a ton of explaining to do. Because she said it.
一人で立てる？
さっきから手を動かしてたから血は巡ってる。歩くぐらいならいけそうだ。
そう、なら問題ないわね。
With that, she turned her back and walked away from him. He had seen this bold form of hers many times before. Instantly, the memories flashed back to him like lightning.
そうだった。青崎はこういうやつだった。
Without knowing it, he cracked a smile. He was so lost that he did not know his left from his right. But recalling this alone was enough to make him calm. The Alko he knew was different from the one in the House of Mirrors. She was not that brooding girl he saw there. He felt a pang of nostalgia. The Alko he knew was brisk in movement and unfaltering in gaze, just like this one. She was the same as when he first met her, moody yet overflowing with confidence in her element.
ほら、急いだ急いだ。アリスがさっきから今でお待ちかねよ。
She was already outside the door, standing in the chilly corridor. And I also want to add this. Yesterday when I was recording, as you guys saw from the beginning of the video, I said I couldn't get comfortable for some reason. I'm mad comfortable right now. I don't know what was happening to me. Like I started literally seeing double. I don't know. Maybe I was just looking at my screen for too long. I had just completed the stream for 7 hours, so maybe that was why. But yeah, maybe I was pushing it too far. But I'm good now. I'm perfectly fine now. I feel very more energetic, even though I just woke up. And I feel like a lot more comfortable. So thank you for asking, whoever asked, if you did. If you didn't, then sorry for wasting your time.
寝たきりの辛さを知らないだろう、青崎は。
Grunting and groaning, Sojiro eventually got to his feet. His body heavy and stiff while he was lying down, cried out in pain as he tried to stand and walk. Every step sent shooting pains through his bones. Despite this, he put on a calm face and made his way towards Alko. Typically, he was quick to not pay any mind to life's struggles, but these pains, he needed to force himself to consciously ignore them. In other words, he was displaying false bravado, an uncharacteristic reaction for someone who never suppressed their true feelings.
驚いた。あんた本当にタフね。
ありがとう。けど心は弱いんだ。
そう。参考までに心に留めておくわ。できるだけ優しく扱えるようにね。
Naturally, her voice was devoid of any true empathy. She turned away from the once more dejected Sojiro and began walking briskly down the corridor.
と。
Just then she stopped. Wow. Feet snapped together as though something had popped into her head. And just as if she was remembering something she had forgotten in a completely trivial way.
それじゃあ行くわよ。ついてきて、宗十郎。
She gallantly turned back the way she was heading. The words sounded so natural as she spoke them. Aqua did not see the look in Sojiro's eyes as he heard her words. Is she like recalling the past? For though she worked in the arcane, the spell Aqua had woven was apparent to everyone but her. After blinking his eyes, As if blinded by something, Sojiro casually nodded and followed behind her. The sheer size of the interior was daunting. The 3 floors of this mansion contained more rooms than Sojiro's entire apartment building, except their size was excessive. Here, the mansion's rooms seemed to be numerous for so few inhabitants, its lavish carpeted halls cold and dreary. The guest room that Sojiro had been sleeping in was on the 2nd floor of the east wing. A staircase leading down to the 1st floor was at the end of the corridor, at the center of the mansion. Winter sunlight beamed through the windows, which only made the empty corridor appear even lonelier. The center of the mansion was topped by a vaulted skylight overlooking the 1st floor. The staircase connected the 1st and 2nd floors, lined its walls. Another staircase at the other end of the 2nd floor corridor presumably led to an attic or a storeroom of sorts on the 3rd floor. Paying no mind to Sojiro's gawking, Alko descended the stairs with familiar steps. The foyer was a place of white and wood grain. Its hardwood floors shone brightly under the sunlight coming in from the ceiling, and the tall white walls were spotless and brawny. There was a staircase leading to the 2nd floor and a long unused fireplace. A neglected telephone sat on a table, opposite of solemn grandfather's clock. It was more like an old castle than a mansion. Ako shot Sojiro a callous stare, who stood captivated by the otherworldly scenery.
今はこっちよ。ぼさっとしない。
She grabbed the knob of the door next to the stairs. There were 4 doors to the foyer, and the easternmost, as you entered the house, led to the drawing room. The door on the opposite side of the foyer led to the mansion's west wing. To the south was the entrance. On the north was one more door next to the fireplace. Tucked underneath the stairs, this door connected to a bathroom, unbeknownst to Sojiro. Due to the lack of windows, the 1st floor's corridors were not well lit. The 2nd floor was a solemn attendant infirmary, the foyer a stairwell in some foreign castle, and the 1st floor corridor was a windowless labyrinth, not unlike the corridors of our hotel. Although it had not been long since Sojiro came to the city, even he could feel this place was out of the ordinary. Seeing as how he was going to be stuck here for the foreseeable future, he found it hard to get excited about living in the haunted house.
そこが今で奥が厨房ね。簡単な料理ぐらいはできるようになってるから。今の隣にはサンルームがあるんだけど、ここが食卓の代わり。ってそんなの後でいっか。
Ako said, reaching for a door along the dim corridor. However, she paused before turning the knob. She flashed Sojiro a meaningful glance, which she quickly withdrew. Then, without further ado, she opened the door.
お待たせ。承諾したわよ、あいつ。
She said to Alice as she entered the drawing room. After hesitating for a moment, Sojiro entered after her. Compared to the corridor, the drawing room was unexpectedly modern. The carpeted floor, leather sofas, and a large 30-inch television were more what Sojiro had come to expect in a normal home. This family-oriented room, a girl far removed from said, sitting quietly on the sofa. Ako sat on the sofa across from the girl in all black. This gave Sojiro 2 seating options. Next to Ako Aozaki, or next to Alice Kuonji. Brother. Oh. Am I going to get a choice? No way. After about 2 seconds of deliberation, he decided to stand by, the wall, as neither option appealed. Yeah, I would have done the same thing, honestly. I would have just stood up, bro. There's no way. Again, what does this mean? Jump to choice in the next scene. Jump to choice in the next scene. So, I haven't had any choices. Again, I still haven't tested this. I wanted to like go back to an older chapter and press it and see what happens. Jump to choice. I feel like it's just like choose the next scene. I really feel like this is just choose the next scene, right? So it's like a skip forward, but you get to like maybe a whole grid. You get to just choose a scene. I don't know, man. I'm gonna try it later, I guess. Alco and Alice were facing each other across a coffee table. The clean, perfectly leveled table somehow added to the austere atmosphere.
当事者も認めたことだし、これで何の問題もないわね、アリス。
Alice gave one deep nod in response to her nod question. From his position against the wall, they looked as though they were clearing up some niggling grievance. Sojiro got the feeling that the two did not entirely see eye to eye concerning what to do with him.
そうね。原因も究明しないといけないし。
She cast a sideways look at Sojiro with those darkly shaded eyes of hers. Her voice shared the same cold indifference, making it abundantly clear that she had no intention of accepting him as a housemate.
けれど、あなたはそれでいいの？遊園地でのことを忘れてはいないでしょ？
Alice's voice was a mixture of judgment and scrutiny. She was aware that from an outsider's perspective, she and Alko appeared dangerous. She wanted to know if Sojiro was up to the challenge of living with such people.
そりゃ夢だと思い込みたいけど、ちゃんと覚えてるし、できるだけ無事に済ませるには、これが一番無難そうだ。
Above all else, it was the only way they would let him live. Alice responded apathetically, with a non-committal murmur. She silently placed a small object on the table with a clink. She pulled her pale fingers away from the small glass bottle. The glass, more pale blue than transparent, was enough to signify its high quality. With a crane-like motion, she removed the stopper. Even though this was the first time he had seen such a thing, something about it made him uneasy. Was it that it made him sad, or... Ako's standoffish behavior only added to his concern. Alice once again fixated her eyes on Sojiro, who was bracing himself for the worst. The glint in her eyes was bewitching. Not a single emotion apparent in her face. She called his name.
しずきくん。
はい。
The moment he responded to her whispered call, his surroundings began to transform. The air grew thick, so thick it took on a color and shape. The density and discomfort that coiled around his skin made it seem like the air had become words. Opening his mouth to gasp for air, the words invaded his lungs. Instinctively, he covered his mouth with his right hand and clutched his chest with his left, both hands appearing clear as mud. Even the thickest of mountain fog never seized his senses like this. If he had to come up with an analogy, no words could quite describe it. But it was like he was standing in the pages of a newspaper. I'm sorry, my headphones are scratching for some reason. Man, everything's going wrong this recording. What's happening? The first sense to adjust this new sensation was his hearing. Then his breathing stabilized, yet the feeling of suffocation remained. There was nothing restraining him that he could see, but he felt an intense claustrophobia. Before he had felt shock at the sudden change, he reached out in an attempt to find escape. But his outstretched hands found only emptiness. It seemed contradictory that a place with no walls and a wide view could feel so cramped. I don't know why I said cramped. Spirited away in a dense fog. Back in the mountains, such superstitions never seemed real to him until now. And then he finally noticed, a surprise to beat all surprises. The drawing room had not changed into another world at all. He knew this was for certain, because he could still see the room he was just in through the fog, as well as two girls, Alko Awazaki and Alice Kuronji, watching him closely. It was simply a problem of perspective. The floor was dark and perfectly flat. Looking up, there were two of them stood. There the two of them stood. The two girls were like two impossibly gargantuan clouds, coldly looking down at him. Remembering the structure of the room and layout of the furniture, Sojiro's unsurpassed condor finally grasped his predicament. The parade at the amusement park had nothing on this. Somehow he was inside the glass bottle that Alice Koenji produced only moments ago.
図らずも
Marveling at Alice's wickedness, Akko glanced at the small bottle on the table.
2日前の夜と同じ状況になったわね。今回そいつは起きてるけど。
Akko calmly mused. Alice, however, was not looking down at the bottle. Instead, her eyes were locked on Akko.
意外ね。青子は怒ると思ってたのに。
いや、私も似たようなこと考えてたから。少しは魔術ってもんを思い知らせておかないと困るでしょ。アリスがやってくれるなら止めはしないし、怒りもしないわ。ま、こっちが予定していたものより何倍もめちゃくちゃだけど。
Akko did not take her eyes off the bottle as she spoke. Although she did her best to feign indifference towards Alice's magecraft, she could not completely hide her curiosity. The figure inside the bottle, likely having caught on to what was happening, tried various things like flailing its arms and spinning around. The surface of the bottle was cloudy, so it was hard to make out exactly what was happening inside.
ところで、これって私にくれたやつとは別物みたいだけど。
あれより作りは細かいわ。青子にあげたのは使い捨ての隔離するだけのものよ。これはお互いの声も聞こえるから。
へえ。けど、その割には何の反応もないわね。
青子には聞こえないだけよ。
Alice said calmly, finally dropping her gaze to the bottle. Just then, the figure inside stopped moving. It appeared only Alice had a connection to the world inside the bottle.
なんだ。術者にしか特典はないんだ。
Akko sighed, losing interest. Ignoring Akko, Alice opened her mouth as if to speak to someone not altogether there.
どう？これでも一番無難だと思う。
The person she was talking to was none other than the one inside the bottle. She was, of course, referring to Sojiro's earlier comment. It was her way of testing the boy who implied that living in the mansion seemed safe.
いきなり小瓶に閉じ込めて聞き返すあたり、容赦ないというか。この子の洋館への執着も問題よね。
Then again, considering Akko had invited this witness to a house of mirrors for a fight to the death, she was in no position to criticize. She would make sure Alice did not let her emotions get the best of her. But for now, she was content to observe as a bystander. After a moment, Alice's expression changed. She must have gotten an answer to her question. Without any way to tell what the situation was inside the bottle, Akko had no idea what the answer was. However, only that Alice's face was the one that she made when the boy she was talking to said what she wanted to hear.
私が言えることでもないけど。
For an instant, she glanced at Akko. Slightly shaking her head, she reached for the small bottle.
ほんと、物好きね、しずきくんは。
She said his name with what seemed like a forlorn frown. As soon as she removed the stopper, the air in the room quivered. The boy who had been casting a shadow on the wall until a minute ago now leaned against it for support again. Akko turned around to face Sojiro right behind her, resting her elbow over the back of the sofa.
どう？気分は。
見ての通り、めちゃくちゃだ。
Sojiro answered with unusual hostility. Akko was reminded of his strange behavior, as she was sure that he would be scared and shocked, not angry.
夢で似たようなものを見てなかったら今頃心臓が止まってたところだ。そこはついてたと思う。信じられないのはなんでいちいち実践するかってことだ。魔術は怖いものなんだって言えば済むだろうに。それと物騒な青崎の声聞こえてたぞ。
物騒で悪うございました。けど言葉じゃなくてきちんと実感してもらいたかったのは本当よ。どう？魔術ってもんを甘く見てたでしょ、宗十郎。
As much as he hated to admit it, she was right. Though it was not that he had taken Magecraft lightly, but merely that he couldn't understand
け
it.
ど実感うんぬん言われても困る。これまでの青崎の無茶っぷりと今のわけのわからなさはとても比べられない。
そりゃそうよ。アリスと比べないでよね。アリスの魔術は私たちの中でもデタラメで、もう言葉にできないぐらい最悪なんだって言ったでしょ。
失礼ね。人命を脅かすという点なら青子の方がよっぽどひどいと思うけど、それよりあなた本当に彼を殺す気はあったの？一体どんな追い詰め方をすれば青崎なら多分安全なんて言葉が返ってくるのかしらね。
そんなのあんたに決まってるでしょ。こいつが何て言ったか知らないけど絶対意味違うから。こいつはね、そもそも何が危ないのかやけどするまで気づかない。っていうか、やけどしてもよし死ななきゃ安いなんて本気で思っちゃう天然ボケなの。ねえ、そうでしょ宗十郎。
え？
He had no idea why she was suddenly shouting, but he nodded anyway just to be safe. The drawing room had become awfully noisy. Alice sat watching the two at a complete loss. And so, Sojiro accepted his supervised life in the mansion, and that he would be living under the same roof as two professional mages. Having experienced firsthand how dangerous that life could get, he was finally at peace with the situation.
まあそういうことなら。
Even if he did not seem like it, he had thought it through in his own way and came to a clear resolution.
それじゃあやっと本題に入れるわね。監視するとは言ったけど、どうやって宗十郎を監視するのか、そもそもあなたを監視する原因になった魔術とは何なのか、そのあたりざざっと説明させてもらうわ。
Perhaps he was brought up to listen closely to the lectures about new information, because Soichiro suddenly looked attentive. Alice, on the other hand, kept her mouth shut in silent defiance.
最初に言っておくと、あんたをここに住まわせる期限は決まってるから。要はその期限まで誰にも私たちのことを喋らず、また勝手に死ななければ晴れて自由の身ってこと。ね、そうよね、アリス。
そうね。私たちを怒らせなければそういう可能性もあるわね。
よし、いきなり話が食い違ってる。
He's like, yup. Sojo's head dropped, like he knew what was coming.
ちょっと黙ってて、アリス。あとあんたも黙ってろ。
She scowled at the two of them, already at her wits' end.
話を続けるけど、秘密保持のためにあんたを住まわせる場合、二次災害はどうしても避けられない。同じ家にいる以上、余計に秘密を見せることになるからね。アリスはそれが嫌なんだろうけど。
Now that Akko mentioned it, Sojiro could see her point. With their target of observation under house arrest, the disclosure of more confidential information was inevitable.
ちょっと待ってくれ。堂々巡りじゃないか、それ。
大丈夫、問題ないわ。だって最後にはここで暮らした記憶ごと私たちのことを忘れてもらうことにしたから。
忘れてもらう？
そう、公園での一件から丸ごと全部 忘れてもらう。ルーンっていう魔術系統があるんだけどね。その中でサクッと記憶を忘れさせるものがあるのよ。非人道的であるのは変わらないけど、命を消す代わりに記憶を消すってことで妥協して。
青崎、それは。
悪いけど反論は却下で、肝心の忘却のルーンなんだけど、私もアリスも専門外だから文献を探して習得するのに時間がかかる。つまりそれが監視の起源ってわけ。私たちが忘却のルーンを見つけるまで命を担保に口を閉じていてもらうわ。アリスはそんなややこしいことはせずに五感全部壊してしまおうなんて言ってるけど。しずきくん、リビングスタチューとか嫌でしょ？
Soldier only understood about 80% of what Akko had explained, and the last part about the living statue had gone straight over his head. He had tried his best to visualize what Akko was going on about, but the only thing he could conjure in his mind was an image of the mascot creature Kitsy Lamb, or Kitsy.
それは確かに嫌だな。
Akko agreed with the bewildered Sojiro, neither one the wiser to the other's misinterpretation.
とにかく遅くても1ヶ月で忘却のルーンは見つけ出せるだろうし、1回きりの実行ならプラス2ヶ月ぐらいでなんとかなるわ。それまであんたにはここで暮らしてもらうわけだけど、私たちについて無知のまま歩き回られると命の保証はできないのよ。そっちもこっちの事情を知らないのは気持ち悪いだろうし。なんで今から簡潔に現代の魔法使いの何たるかを教えてあげる。それで少しは私たちへの勘違いもなくなるだろうし。
Not that she thought this country bumpkin had any idea of old or new anyway. Thought the thought brought a smug grin to her lips.
洋館のことは後にして、まずは私たちの立場についてね。あ、でも1から100まで理解する必要はないから。どうせ門外漢なんだし、漢字言ったことだけしっかり噛み締めておきなさい。
Sojiro nodded obediently to Akko's professional instructions. This was Akko's way of telling him not to ask questions when he did not understand something. And though Sojiro had taken issue with her statement, he meekly obeyed, knowing better than to object now. Akko nodded approvingly at his attentiveness and started her lecture. Her long, long lecture.
まず魔術師、魔法使いの話からね。魔術と魔法の違いは宗十郎には関わりのない話だからしないけど、それぞれ別種のものだと思ってくれればいいわ。で、魔術師のことだけど、これは絶対条件として隠された存在でなくてはならないの。同業者に知られるのは仕方ないとしても、あなたみたいに関わりのない人間に知られるのは罪にあたる。ほとんど死罪クラスのね。なぜかっていうと、魔術ってのは隠されていないと力が薄れてしまうものだから。神秘の語源は閉ざすというギリシャ語だけど、魔術は限られた水着でなければ魔術でなくなってしまう。
Really? Is that really what mystery and mystic mean? That's interesting.
文明にとって未知なるもの、未開なるものは開かれていないからこそ恐怖に値するのと同じね。知られたら迫害されるから隠すじゃないの。未知で亡くなった魔術師というより魔術ね。明かされた魔術は力を弱めてしまう。だから隠匿するのよ。何より私たちの未来のために。
魔術の仕組みはよくわからないけど、とにかく自分だけの秘密でないと弱くなるってことか。じゃあ青崎も弱くなってるのか？俺が見ちゃったから。
いいえ、別に。ここからはちょっと込み入った話でね。弱くなるっていうのはあくまで全体。それも随分と未来の話。個人単位では関係のない話よ。汝隠匿すべしって不分律は、この大元の仕組みが形骸化していつの間にか絶対のルールになっているだけなの。 文明社会の法律と一緒よ。犯罪、不道徳を罰するのは人間的であろうとする意識の高さと、それとは全く別の全体の仕組みを守るための構造的な結論でしょ。犯罪が罰せられるのは野放しにしたらせっかく築いた社会がうまく機能しなくなるから。で、私たちにとって犯罪にあたるのは神秘の一般化、低俗化であって、不道徳とか殺人とかはまあそれぞれの良心次第ってことで基本的に罪にもならない。そんなろくでもない連中にルールを敷いたのが魔術協会っていう集まり、組合みたいなものよ。魔術を普及の神秘とせよというのは、魔術を魔術として永続させるために敷いたルールに過ぎないわ。けどその原則は絶対でさ、これを破った者は魔術世界にはいられなくなる。いえ、実際問題として生きていくのが困難になる。私たちは私たちのまあ魔術師としての命、そういうのを守るために目撃者であるあんたを消さなくちゃいけなかった。そこ同情とかしなくていいから。私たちの事情を知ったぐらいで遊園地のことを帳消しにしないでよ。私たちは私たちの判断であんたを殺そうとしたんだから、誰彼のせいってわけじゃない。恨むならきちんと私を恨んでちょうだい。それはともかく、過去魔術師は職業として成り立ったぐらい社会に認知されていたけど、その魔術自体は墓まで持っていく秘密だった。それがどう歪んだかは知らないけど、現代ではその職業すら秘密にしなくてはならなくなった。そこまでしないと遠い未来、魔術すら消費するだけのものに解体されると教会は恐れたのよ。自然界の仕組みもかつて天上の領域だった宇宙の運営すら、私たちは人知で解き明かせるほどになった。人の手に余るもの、神秘という未知の領域にとって魔術が最後の砦になると教会の設立者は信じたのかもしれない。それとも魔術なんてもう意味がないって達観したのかもね。そんなわけで魔術師はその正体を隠して各々の秘技を伝えていった。他人に教えるわけにはいかないから、必然的にその伝承者は子孫になる。私もアリスもそうやって何代か続いた連中の末なのよ。さっき言った魔術協会っていうのはそんな細々と続いてる連中を束ねる一大組織。魔術師にとって司法の神ってところかしらね。教会もいろんな派閥に分かれるんだけど、大抵の魔術師はロンドンの魔術協会に属している。汝隠匿すべしっていうのも教会の三大原則の一つよ。魔術師が一般人に秘密を漏らすと教会から罰が下される仕組みになっている。そんな罰なんかなくても自分と血族が伝えた魔術のために目撃者は消さないといけないんだけど。
And that was the end of the first part of the lecture. Akko paused for a moment. Shoujo was doing his best to process the information.
次行くけどいい？
いいけど、その前に確認したい。魔術師が正体を隠すのは自分のためじゃなく魔術のためだったけど、最近では自分の正体を隠すことの方が重要になっている。そしてその決まりを破ると教会というところからお咎めが来る。つまり青崎たちもその教会に入っているのか？
いいえ、私たちはフリーよ。一応教会とつながりはあるけどね。単純に教会は最大勢力ってだけ。連中は頼まれもしないのに魔術世界全体の秩序を守ってるの。だから私たちが何であれ彼らとの関わりがないにしても、魔術師としての決まりを破ったら罰しに来るわ。
わかった。大体飲み込めた。
よしよし。そうやって自分に必要な部分だけ手に入れなさい。じゃ、 次は魔術について。と言っても、私自身語れるほど学んでいないんだけどね。
ん？
ごめん、こっちの話だから忘れて。さっきも言ったけど、現代において魔術は無意味なものになりつつある。ライターのない大昔なら火を起こせればそれは魔術として成り立つわ。けど今は何かと便利でしょ。あなたならよくわかると思うけど。
Sojiro nodded with a glum look on his face. He had been made painfully aware of such conveniences. Difficult tasks that would occupy an entire day of work in the mountains could be performed easily here. For him, having been brought up in the mountains without electricity or running water, city life was by definition magic. He only wished it would not be such back-breaking work to adapt to said conveniences.
でも道具を使わずに火を起こせるのは神様の仕事だと思うけど。
そのために積み重ねた手間は火炎放射器を手に入れるより面倒だとしても。
Shoujo wasn't sure how to answer Alko. It would have been easy for him to ask Alko how much accumulated effort she thought it had taken humans to imitate those gods, but he knew it would come across as an insult.
さっきのを見る限り魔術ってのは何でもできると思ったけど、それは誤解なのか。
He glanced at the bottle, or the glass bottle, on the table. Mentally, he sighed in relief. He still had not come to terms with the fact that he had been trapped inside that tiny thing. However,
あら、それこそ誤解よ。万能じゃなければ誰が魔術なんて学ぶと思ってるの？
Akko puffed out her chest as she what him?
手間暇かかるけど魔術にできないことはないわ。中にはできていないけどできているように見せるみたいな何らかのイカサマはあるけどね。この世界に生まれた以上、その許容範囲でできないことなんてないの。そこで魔法が出てくるんだけど、それはまた改めて。私が言いたかったのは、魔術は奇跡を起こしているのではなくて、その過程が奇跡だってこと。結果が奇跡になるのは魔法の方なの。偉大な魔術師っていうのは、個人の魔術だけで旅客機飛ばしたりする人のこと。対して偉大な魔法使いっていうのは、今不可能なことを可能にする人のことよ。そういった意味じゃ、私たちは最後の魔法使いになるかもしれないけどね。
脱線してるわよ、青子。
Alice had been quietly listening until she muttered her rebuke, as if Alko had crossed the line.
そこまで教える必要はないでしょう。しずきくんに教えるべきことは、私たちと暮らす上で危険になることだけじゃなかった。
悪かったわ。ちょい口滑らせた。ともかく魔術師っていうのは暇さえあれば魔術の実験をしてる連中で、自分の家系が伝えてきた秘技を守るためなら鬼でも悪魔にでもなる。必然そのアジト工房って言うんだけど、工房も魔術的な機構が積み重なって要塞みたいになっちゃうのよ。秘技を守るために入ってきた相手を問答無用で叩きのめす仕掛けとか。この洋館もそういった工房と同じなの。不用心に歩き回ってさっきみたいなことになったら私でも助けてあげられないから、暗闇には気をつけなさい。気がついたら鏡の中にいるとか本気であるから。
Sojiro so hoped they would provoke him with a general idea of what to watch out for when he passed, knowing that he was unlikely to get a straight answer.
枝葉から入っちゃったけど、要は私たちのプライベートに関わるなってこと。いくら最後には記憶を消すって言っても、それを見られた段階で消すしかないものもあるから。
なるほど。この中にもルールがあることはよくわかった。他に注意すべきことは。
His eyes wandered as he trailed off mid-sentence, pondering. He understood that the mansion was more dangerous than outside and that magecraft needed to stay a secret, but the explanation seemed to contradict his current problem. For starters, how had he managed to witness something that they took such pains to keep hidden?
すまない。話の腰を折るんだけど、いいかな。魔術師は教会という組織で結ばれてるんだろ。なら、どうして青崎はあんな人形に襲われたんだ？あれの持ち主が魔術師なら、君たちは味方同士で争っていることになる。何か説明が不足していないか？
それは最後にしようと思ってたのよ。普通はここまでの話だけで眉唾者っていうか笑い飛ばすっていうか、いくら経験済みだからって魔術なんてもんをあっさり受け入れるなんてできないっていうか。
Akko scratched her head, as though troubled by how Sojiro could take every word at face value. Across from her, Alice's face betrayed no expression. Isn't it portrayed? No expression? But she shared the same opinion.
おかしいのか、それ。
おかしいわよ。そもそもあんたは第一ステップから変だった。普通は驚いたり怖がったり無視したりするものなのに、どうして魔法使いだなんて言った私を信じたの？
Do you remember where this man came from, bro? Seeing a TV was magic to him. Seeing an escalator was magic. Moving stairs. Bro, you saying you're a magician? He thought that could have been normal. He literally asked Toby Ramar if that was normal. Like, he was like, maybe I know I'm new to the city. Maybe that's just what y'all do around here. You know, maybe y'all throwing fire beams at each other. I don't know. Is that normal? He asked him for a reason. He never died. Like, he saw it. And he just thought maybe that was normal. That's why he accepts that at face value. Because he's getting... Look. In retrospective, this question should have been posed at the House of Mirrors. Back then, though Soldier was surprised by seeing the phenomenon of magecraft for the first time, he showed no surprise or discomfort toward Alko, the mage wielding it. Like I said, everything to him is brand new, so getting a little bit more new information is like, whatever. He has to keep moving. Feeling the probing stares of the two girls, no, the two mages, made Sojiro feel uneasy. From where he was standing, their suspicion was suspicious in and of itself.
なんでも何もない。青崎、山ではね、あるものはあるのが当たり前なんだよ。理由をつけられるだけの知識がなかったからにしても、実際に見たものを信じないなんてことはないんだ。
That's also very fair.
それに君も言ったろ。あなたにとっては魔法もライターも同じものなんだろうって。
Exactly, bro. Though they weren't really the same to him anymore, he added quietly before shutting up. What he said about those innocent days in the mountains had come from the heart, and the words resonated with not only Akawazaki, but also Alice Kuronji. It was something everyone should have principles to stand by. Indeed, to this boy, those words were an unshakable truth.
あるものはあるか。
She was impressed, if only slightly. If this boy, no matter how much of an outlier he was, could accept the things around him, he would be able to get through just fine.
そうね。宗十郎はそうなのよね。簡単に信じてもらえることが信じられないなんて、私たちの方がどうかしてたわ。
Much like when Alko met Sojiro for the first time. In that classroom on the first day, Sojiro took everything that was happening in his stride. The memory brought a bitter smile to Alko's face.
じゃ、気を取り直してっと。宗十郎の疑問だけどね。魔術師もいろいろあって、教会に属していない連中もいるの。こういった連中は教会の目を盗んでやりたい放題で、利益目的で他の魔術師に喧嘩を売ってくる。そんな連中にとって私たちは都合のいい格好のカモなのよ。私たちは教会と協定関係にあるだけで門下ってわけじゃないから。 私たちが殺されたところで教会は助けてくれないしね。
でも魔術師が魔術を使うのは禁じてるんだろ？
それが公にならないのなら教会は目をつむるわ。むしろバレなければ魔術師同士の争いを奨励してるぐらいよ。技術も使わないと錆びるってね。ま、私たちが襲われてるのはそれとは別の話で、単に土地を持ってるからなんだけど。
土地ってこの家？
まさかこの岬市一帯の管理地の権利を持ってるのよ、私とアリスは。
管理地ってつまり土地の利権？
Dashel, Sojiro looked away. He was sure he could see a halo of light around Akka. He had only been renting an apartment for 2 weeks, but he was already aware of how magnificent the prospect of owning land in the city might be.
おお。
The words Sojiro was trying to articulate was rich. Oh, you can't be saying that. He shook all over with emotion he did not fully grasp.
悪いけど、そういうんじゃないから。私たちで土地って言ったら、魔術師としての霊地の所有権、支配権のことを言うの。うちはマイナーだけど、古くからこの辺りに根を下ろしてた魔術師で、岬町もうちの管理下ってわけ。管理地っていうのはね、霊的な力が歪んで集まりやすい土地のこと。そういう土地は昔から貴重で、魔術の実践、実験には不可欠でもある。成功への絶対条件は、優れた霊地、堅固な工房、多くの弟子たちってね。魔術師たちにとって、土地付き館付きの住み家を持つのは、一つの野望なんだから。
Sojiro let her continue while wondering exactly who these two girls were, and to have achieved both ambitions already.
でも、その管理地は大部分が教会に仕切られてて、もう余っている土地はないの。はぐれ魔術師や土地のない魔術師は、教会に毎月寄付金を納めて土地を借りるしかない。ま、手よく教会のお偉いさんたちに尽くす働き蜂ってところね。
Borrow land from the organization in exchange for a monthly donation? So they're paying them to work? Huh? Or is it the opposite? That they get a monthly donation for taking care of their land? Because that's insane if they're paying them to work for them. That's
で
insane.
も、ここの土地は何百年も前から青崎のものだから、教会とは関係がないの。ここまで言えばわかるでしょ？そういったフリーの連中からすれば、私たちの管理地はこの上ないごちそうなんだって。
Sojo nodded to himself, unsure whether to call the conversation mundane or outright disturbing.
よくわかった。青崎たちは土地の奪い合いをしているんだな。
そういうこと。ただ、岬の管理地はマイナーのさらにマイナーだから、やってくる挑戦者も三流ばっかりよ。今回の敵だって、どっかの三流魔術師が、ここなら楽に奪えると思ってやってきたんだろうし。ま、それもあんたの乱入で急戦してるんだけど。
管理地の話はそれで十分よ、青子。しずきくんも他に魔術師がいると分かってくれたようだし、危険があるとすれば私たちの戦いに彼が巻き込まれる可能性だけど。
それは大丈夫でしょ。だってこいつ魔力のかけらもないじゃない。魔力感知には引っかからないし、番犬以下の人間は戦力って言わないから狙われることもないだろうし。私たちはただ忘却のルーンを見つけるまでこいつを逃がさなければいいだけでしょ。
Alice silently stared at her partner down. The ideas of involving Sojiro differed greatly in both gravity and risk. Ako's lack of experience had led her to believe that Sojiro would not get directly involved in any fighting. It was an honest and rational thought. Ako despised wasted action, so it was natural for her to expect the same frugality when it came to her enemies. However, there were those in this world who could not tell right from wrong until it was too late.
先のことは誰にもわからないから、その時になって後悔がなければいいけれど。
With a gloomy sigh, Alice came to her feet.
ちょっと何のために長話したと思ってるのよ。一番重要なあんたの意見聞いてないんですけど。
あなたがあなたの方針を守るというのならそれでいいわ。私も好きにするだけよ。
Alice glided soundlessly to the door. As the girl in black opened it, she paused, barely lit by the corridor. Then, without warning, what the? To the rhythm of her footstep, the small glass bottle floated into the air and shattered without mercy.
あの時こうしておけばよかった。
Her sharp tone made Sojiro's face go pale. Alice's voice was so quiet, it was hard to tell she was being serious or mocking him.
私も言い忘れていたけど。
She icily eyed them before turning away, and in a voice even colder than her gaze, stated,
まだ認めていないから。
Her frigid departure seemed to forebode the many difficulties that lie ahead. I understand because if this gets found out, their life as mages is practically done at that point. Right?
たく、往生際が悪い。
Akko leaned back on the sofa while hurling abusive, huh? I feel like something in that word is silent, like emphasis, so like it's not epithet. I don't know. Her face looked even more irritated than
見
usual.
逃すのとここに住まわせるのは別問題よって。じゃあそれ以外にどんな方法があるってのよ。譲る気もなさそうだし、この分じゃ実力行使に出るかもね、あの子。
Sojiro threw a wary glance at Alko while she grumbled. He wondered that Alice's show of defiance meant shattering the glass bottle like she did.
宗十郎には記憶をなくしてもらうってことで話はつけたけど、心の底から納得してないってことでしょ。アリスにしちゃ珍しく他人を意識してたけど、やっぱりここに住まわせるとなると難しいみたい。寝てる分には良かったけど、起きてるあんたを見たらこうえも言わぬ刺激心を刺激されたとかさ。気をつけてね、宗十郎。あの子あんたを殺しに来るかもしれないから。
If anything, Alko's warning was an indication that persuading Alice had hit a dead end.
なんか状況はあの夜からあまり変わってないようだね、青崎。
She shot him an unconcerned look in reply.
そうじゃないぞ。青崎の次はあの子がやる気満々じゃないか。さっきみたいな目にあったら逃げることもできない。こういうの生殺しって言うんじゃないか。
そうならないように努力するのね。ま、アリスの理由は遊園地の時ほど切迫したものじゃないから、そのうち諦めてくれるとは思うんだけど。
青崎の時とは違うアリスの理由？
ええ、遊園地の時は秘密厳守のためだったけど、それは一応解決してる。あんたが底抜けに律儀なやつだってのはアリスだってもう分かってるし。なんで秘密厳守云々であそこまで反対する理由はないの。あの子は単にね、ここに住んでほしくないだけなのよ。それだ。
She said so matter-of-factly, her eyes cold and serious. Sojiro had hoped for a trace of deceit or exaggeration, but alas.
確かにあの子はそんな素振りだったけど変だね。それならもっと他の手段を取ればいいのに。
Perhaps feeling guilty about putting Alice out, Sojiro looked uncharacteristically concerned. Ako immediately knew what his words really meant.
例えば記憶を消す魔術が見つかるまでさっきの小瓶の中に閉じ込めておくとか。
The apathy in her voice, until now, was gone. Sojiro answered with a simple nod. In truth, it was undoubtedly the easiest solution for all parties concerned. However,
宗十郎、私約束は破らないの。覚えておいて。
she hated taking the easy way out. That quiet fury was clear in her soft words. As for where the fury was directed, Sojiro was actually acutely aware. The pain in his chest made him regret making her say those words.
すまない。考えが足りなかった。
His sudden apology caused her usual sullen expression to return. Ako had not appreciated how angry she was, let alone the reason for it. To her, his apology had come out of nowhere.
あんたって本当わかんないわね。なんでそこで謝るのよ。
She stared at Sojiro, unblinking.
あれそうだな。自分でもよくわからない。多分そういう気分になったからだろう。
Even in saying he was not sure, Sojiro had answered honestly. Ako was at a loss for words.
ただ青崎の言いたいことは分かった。約束を守るっていうことは結果じゃなく家庭を守るってことなんだな。
He shot her a brazenly honest smile. That smiling face, filled with blissful ignorance, almost made her smile back instinctively.
当たり前じゃない。オチだけ合ってればいいなんて恥ずかしくてできないでしょ。
Ako attempted to cover for her embarrassment with a quick retort. Though unintentional, having her true feelings exposed like that made Ako a little uncomfortable. Finding offense in something was second nature to Ako. Being made to feel uncomfortable was not. Though far from being unhappy at the remark, she turned away from her speaker. To disguise her perceived shame, Ako started up the conversation again.
あなたを見逃すって言うなら気持ちの問題じゃなくてちゃんと状況もそうなるようにするのは当たり前なの。宗十郎をここに住まわせることがあの約束を守ることになるんなら厄介なアリスだって言い伏せるわよ。脅かすだけならまだしもずっと瓶付けなんてさせられるわけないでしょ。
そっか。青崎があの子を説得しない素振りなのはもうできるだけの説得をした後だからなのか。あ、それで彼女とは冷戦中なんだ。
別にあんたのためじゃないわ。私は私のために約束を守ってるだけだし。お察しの通り、私のやるべきことはもう終わってるし、あとはそっちが努力する番だから勝手にすれば。
Huh? He replied, tilting his head.
あのね、いい？同居案を何とか認めさせることができるのは私だけだから、2日間ぶっ通しでアリスを言い伏せもした。けどそれ以上は無理。私、ここから先はノータッチだから。しばらくはアリスから守ってあげるけど、その間にあの子にあんたを認めさせることはあんたにしかできないんだからね、宗十郎。
なんと
Sojiro had not expected that at all. So you have to be her roommate? Duh. Ooh, what a shot. So yeah, you have to be her roommate. Like, that's literally all she just said. What's so surprising? The girl in black who kept everyone at arm's length. If Alko was a modern-day mage in hiding, then Alice was a bona fide witch from the Middle Ages. Just give her food. Literally just get her food. Get her takeout and she'll love you.
どれだけ難しいことを言ってるか分かってるか。
I know the tech, bro. Just get her some takeout, bro.
そうね。私もこの件に関してだけは同情するわ。
Alko stood up from the sofa. That should be easy considering he works at a kitchen. This was the end of the discussion, at least for now.
私たちがどんな人間かはおおよそ分かったでしょ。
True.
魔術に関してはこれ以上立ち入らない方があんたのためだから、説明はここまでね。で、肝心の今後の方針だけど、3ヶ月間ここで暮らす。当初の目標というより最初の試練は、なんとかアリスに同居人として認めてもらうこと。
試練って言った。今そういう類のことを言った。
ごまかしてもいいことないでしょ、この手のことは。うまくいかなきゃ粉々なわけだし。
With her cold-blooded remark, Akko started walking toward the door.
あ、そうそう。宗十郎の部屋だけど、3階に用意しといたから。2階のホールの裏側に階段があるから使って。ここは寮ってわけでもないし、時間は自由に使いなさい。ただし、西館にだけは入らないようにね。東館は私が借りてるから比較的安全だけど、それでも歩き回らない方が無難だわ。ま、基本安全なのはあんたの部屋とここだけよ。
中の説明ってまさかそれだけ？青崎はいろいろおかしい。魔術なんかよりもっと大事な説明があると思う。
He desperately called out to her as she began leaving the drawing room. I'm sorry, that face gets me every time. Akko could not help but pity
せめ
Sojiro.
てほら、案内とか。
面倒なんでパス。おのぼりさんを案内するなんて2回もやれば十分よ。起きたばっかりだし、とりあえず今日は部屋で休んだら。朝になったら学校まで案内してあげるから。もっとも、私もそう暇じゃなし。そばについてあげられるのは期末試験が終わるまでってことで。1週間以内にアリスと仲良くなるなり、弱みを握るなりしないと、まあ、あれよね。
With barely a wave of a goodbye, the student council tyrant walked out. He unconsciously clenched his hand. He raised. Left alone, he was at a complete loss. Then, as if to encourage him, trip, trip, trip. With the sound of lightly fluttering wings, a blue robin appeared out of nowhere. The tiny, chubby bird innocently looked Sojiro up and down. The blue robin, a bird said to bring happiness according to folklore, flapped its little wings as if to cheer him on. Then, with a flutter, it mercilessly flicked off the lights. Leaving Sojiro alone in the drawing room, Akko returned to her bedroom. She closed the door to her room, and as soon as she sat on her bed, she was overcome by an unexpected wave of exhaustion. Sojiro had no way of knowing, but she had been preparing for a war. In the event Alice impulsively played out a ploy, Akko had to be ready to react in an instant. She sighed heavily, but not from the fatigue she felt at fighting out with
ちょっと
Alice.
突っぱねすぎたか？
She frowned, a dejected frown. What weighed on Akko's mind was not Alice.
でも甘くするのはあいつのためにならないし。基本おとなしくしてもらった方がいいわけだし。
It would be trouble if he wandered around like he owned the place after all. The safest thing for him would be if he held up in his room, too scared out of his wits to leave.
青崎は味方だなんて勘違いされても困るしね。アリス同様、人でなし扱いされた方が楽だわ。
She nodded to herself, agreeing with her take on the situation. For the most part, it was a sound plan. If there was a problem, it would be this.
すまない青崎、一つ聞きたいことがあるんだが。
Not 10 minutes had passed since leaving him in the drawing room. For Sojiro to shirk off what she had said and visit her room so fast, it was like he had no sense of danger at all.
実は外に出たいんだ。
Of course, he would ask to leave the house. Oh, the despair. Alko lacked the energy for a sarcastic barb.
洋館の中は歩き回らないし、用を済ませたらきちんと戻ってくる。ただ門限とかあったら聞いておこうと思って。
でもアルバイトには行くのよね。
How did you know? Sojo exclaimed in surprise. When it was Alko who desired to display her shock at him.
まあいいわ。基本午後10時まで。その時間には必ず屋敷にいること。その後は夜勤に出かけるなり、庭でバーベキューするなり、何でも好きにしていい。それと玄関に鍵はかかってないから。
気のせいじゃなければだけど、青崎すごく怒ってないか？
あんた相手に気を使った自分に呆れ果ててるだけよ。外に出るのはいいけど、その前にこの錠剤飲んで。
ん？
Sojo took the purple pill from her outstretched hand and dubiously put it in his mouth. He told himself that it must have been some kind of medicine.
それじゃあ行ってくる。いろいろありがとう、青崎。
あっそ。今度は窓から出ていかないでよね。
Sojo laughed himself all the way to the foyer, unsure of what exactly he had found funny. Yeah, he almost killed himself. Alko watched him go, both indifferent and amazed all at once.
予定が半日早まっただけか。あの薬を飲ませるの明日の朝にしてあげようと思ったのに。
She huffed, ruffling her hair in exasperation and returning to her room. Discerning what made Sojiro tick was a waste of brain matter. In all likeliness, he was more concerned about missing 2 days of work than his own well-being after being bedridden for 2 days. With a day's work behind him, Sojiro returned to the mansion.
よし、どこを探しても2階のホールから上がれる階段はここだけだ。
It was just before midnight. This was the scene that awaited him beyond the rickety staircase. Not much surprise, Sojiro, or rather, being surprised, had become normal to him. This scene, however, was enough to leave him speechless. The room allotted to Sojiro. That's why, in Persona, he put him in the attic as well. Because Sojiro was in an attic, and he knew that that was how you got the greatest protagonist of all time. Interesting. No matter how, if you don't understand the reference, play Persona, all right? I'm not going to explain it. No matter how he looked at it, no matter how he ran it through his mind, was without a shadow of a doubt an attic. That's insane. They had the entire house with a whole bunch of rooms, and they put him in the attic. That's crazy. The treatment stirred a tinge of anxiety in him. Just as he was about to flop on the taut sheets of his bed, wondering if he could make this work despite his share of other problems. He noticed the awkward courtesy of so meager as to be useless.
寒かったら重ねて使うこと。これはサービスとする。
The message in the memo pointed to the meticulous personality of the author. The bed had been perfectly prepared, carefully setting aside the blanket that had been painstakingly placed on the edge of the bed for him in case he needed it. He looked up at the sky. At least you have a nice view. Though faint, the stars twinkled through the skylight. For a mountain boy, the meager light was more than enough for him. The stark contrast with the drawing room had caught him off guard, but now that he had collected himself, it was not so bad. This room fit his personality. Even if he was not used to the building, he felt more at ease here than he did in any building in the city. Perhaps because it was built on a hill surrounded by woods. The atmosphere here was more close to the mountains where he used to live.
でも家の中に霧が出るのはどうなんだろう。
He crooked his neck, pondering over the spectacle he had witnessed. On the way to his room, Sojourner had encountered what looked like a fog in the foyer on the second floor. What in the... The misty fog drifted a portion of the corridor, reminding him of a swarm of mosquitoes. As he stared at it, he swore he could make out a strange landscape, and as he moved closer to get a better look, again, out of nowhere, here inside of the mansion, a little blue bird darted purposely in front of him.
鳥?
The bird caught his attention, stopping him in his tracks. When he looked to check the fog again, the strange scene had disappeared.
この家隙間でもあるのかな。明日青崎に聞いてみるか。
He muttered to himself as he sat on the bed. Meager as it was, the starlight peeping through the skyline calmed him.
これなら。
Exhaling slowly, he lay down. For the time being, he had the essentials needed to live, and his bed was many times softer than it appeared. Thinking his worries seemed smaller than they were, he quickly drifted off to sleep. That was the story of from when he opened his eyes to when he fell asleep. Just like that, the short night following the long night was over. For one thing was true. Shojiro was an optimist to a fault, but it wasn't the end of the world. Now, let us rewind 5 hours prior to this glutton for punishment going to bed. Huh? All right. I think I have to end it here. So, as I said in the first part before, I did a little next day thing, I'm now recording this on Saturday, and I have to upload this on Sunday. And I still have to make a thumbnail for Kingdom Hearts. So, I think it's best that I stop here. It's like, what, we're 140 in? And then, maybe we're 150 in by now. God dang. But, yeah. So, it's best I end here, which is interesting. Well, is that quick save? Is that just quick save? Cool. I didn't know it was a thing. And continue off from here. And next time, probably actually I'll just record it tomorrow. Say screw it, because look, 7:59, man. It's getting bright too. I usually record these at night, and it's getting bright. I'm not, the mojo is off. The vibe. But yeah, we'll end it here and continue off from there. I think that's a perfect place, even, honestly. And to be honest to myself, I pushed a lot further than I thought I would have. So amazing. So I'm going to edit this right after to make sure it gets out to you guys on time. Hopefully this video is not blocked like the last, but if it is, would you rather me, because I could have gotten rid of the minute and then it wouldn't have been blocked, but I felt like that scene was so important and so interesting to get rid of it. I mean, you can still read it. Like, that's the beauty of it. It's not like there's not, stuff telling you what's happening, even though you can't hear anything. But I don't know. I was really put into like a jar. Like, I felt like I had no choices, but just the two options of getting rid of it completely and kind of ruining the experience, or getting rid of it and allowing people to see it in Japan. With that being said, I guess people in Japan are Japanese, and they could, most likely get their hands on Witch on the Holy Night regardless, before we could even in anywhere else. So I don't know. It's weird. If I have any Japanese fans or supporters that see this, let me know so I could cater more towards that. In that sense of, if the video gets blocked, I'll get rid of it. It was only a minute again of like a 3-hour video, right? It was like 3 hours of the recent Witch on the Holy Night upload. So yeah, that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, Ethan Prince Eternal. Remember, no such thing as hard, just how long you want to fight.
Mata 強さに傷ついても絶対